Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. It's February 16th, 2022, and today's weekly webinar is called Scheduling Substitute Teachers to Take Attendance. We really appreciate you taking the time out today from your busy schedule and joining us for our webinar. We are recording these. You will receive an email with the recording, so if you want to check back with anything, you can do that, as well as the presentation slides. So with that, we'll get going. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Joyce. I'm the head of client services at JMC, and I am joined today by Lynn Evans, a client service specialist at JMC and former teacher, principal, superintendent, and all-around great guy from the great state of Iowa. Lynn, would you like to pipe in and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, in addition to being a former teacher, principal, and superintendent in Iowa, I also do some substitute teaching since my retirement. So I can tell you firsthand how slick this little program works.
Perfect. Great to have you along too, Lynn, today. So Lynn will be monitoring questions and also adding his expertise to today's webinar. So with that, we'll get started. So what's the plan for today? Well, about 30 minutes here, we will walk you through the process on how to create and schedule substitute teachers to take attendance in JMC Teacher. Here's what's on the agenda: creating a substitute teacher, then scheduling a substitute teacher to take a class in the schedule and take attendance in JMC Teacher. Please hold your questions until the Q&A session at the end of each section. If you do want to communicate with me, please feel free to use the Q&A feature in the webinar toolbar. We encourage that. Lynn will be monitoring those and make sure we're asking those along the way. Okay, step one, well, is creating a substitute teacher. Boy, Lynn, we know that schools in the last couple of years have really had a struggle with substitute teachers, but this can also work for staff that are subbing for other classrooms. You could put them in as a substitute as well, correct?
Absolutely.
And
it's also a great time saver for your office staff.
Yeah, and I think the better our schools learn to use this, Lynn, I think it's fair to say that takes the pressure off that already busy main hub, the office. So if we can do this before, in fact, this could be done in the summer, couldn't it? And done even before school starts, you could place all of your regular substitutes in the database in JMC and just not assign roles or classes yet. So it's a really handy thing, allows you to set it up beforehand, allows you to edit and alter it along the way in the school year. Anything you want to add before we get started here, Lynn?
No, I think we can just dive right in.
All right, sounds good. Well, substitute teachers, as we know, play a large role in schools and having substitutes into the classroom, and we can get those added to JMCs so that they can better perform as substitutes and help the office staff in actually entering those vital attendance, that attendance information that goes to the office. So this is a super great feature within the JMC software. So here's what the screen looks like, and add and granting building access. So to get a new substitute entered in the JMC office program, you go to attendance, staff, substitutes. Again, attendance, staff, and substitutes. And step one, you select the substitute to be edited by entering the name in the substitute field. So you can add a substitute here. You can remove a substitute by these two buttons right here. Is a substitute new to your district, you just hit the add sub button, which is right here. If you want to find one that's out there, as I aforementioned, you can just click, you can either type in the find field to quickly find them, or you can just click the little down drop down menu and it will display for you as well. Both really handy. Place a check mark in the building access. Lynn, this is super important. If this is the way you can really quickly turn off and on a sub from being able to access building information, is just by that powerful checkbox under building access. And I really, that is a super powerful and neat feature. Just by checking that box, we're going to then allow the substitute teacher as teaching in the building to log in to the JMC Teacher program. Step 3, enter or edit substitute information in the appropriate fields. And as you can see, we have a whole bunch of appropriate fields here. There's first name, last name, username, password. These are the logon credentials then that you'll need in the JMC Teacher app to have that substitute log on. One confusion I have a lot with sometimes with my schools that I support, Lynn, is they think that they log on as the teacher's credentials, and they don't. They get their own. They get their own username, their own password to access that teacher's data and their class data. So we have the username, the password, we have the email of the substitute, we have the city, state, the zip code. We even have 2 phone number fields, which are pretty darn handy to have here. And what I think is super handy too is the note field. That can be utilized if you have a teacher that just wants to substitute in the high school and middle school and doesn't want to substitute in your elementary school, or if they or vice versa, they just want to do elementary subbing. You can put those helpful notes right there within the JMC software, right there in the note field.
I would like to add, Brett, that when you add a substitute, you only have to do it once.
Right. Good point. Yeah, you do it once and then you can just check off the building access as needed or add records as needed, right? You can just edit those each time they sub. Correct. Good point. Again, I mentioned the note field and the note box. What's nice about JMC is, again, you see the applicable one that's put in here. John prefers to sub in high school classes. It just allows you to know what this substitute actually prefers in subbing. You can click the update button, which is right here, that updates the information. So if you want to change a phone number or whatever, you just hit the update button, which updates this record. Just as Lynn said, you only have to put them in once. You can update information here, email, address if they move, new phone number if they get a new phone. You can just edit the person once they're entered as that substitute. You can click the print button too to print the current substitute teacher's information, or the export button to export it to a CSV file, where you can import it then into Excel or whatever to manipulate or do reports or whatever you wanted to do with it. Okay, let's take a live look then at creating a substitute. So if I go to JMC and I log on, I'm already in the Office program. So I'm going to level set, go home. We go to attendance, just like you would if they were staff. You go to staff, which makes intuitive sense, and then substitutes under staff. Again, just to go through that, we're going to attendance, we're going to staff, and we're going to substitutes. And here it opens up, as we talked about, you can click this. Here are the subs that are in the system already, Lynn. If I want to add a substitute, it's as easy as hit the button. It blanks the screen. I give it access. I put their first name. We're going to go, we'll put Lynn in. And we're going to give him a common username, which is what we usually do. And password, we're going to just put Iowa #1 exclamation. We can put in an email password here. We could put an address in if we wanted to. I'm not going to go that far. We can even code, Lynn, that if it's a cell number, we could put a cell number in there. And you can list that. We hit the update. Let's say Lynn. Oops. And middle school. So Lynn prefers to sub at the high school or middle school level. We hit update. And Lynn, have I left anything out? Is it that simple?
It's that simple. If you know they have a landline, you might want to add in a second phone. But it literally takes minutes.
So if I had a home number, Lynn, I would just update this record, right? Just hit update. And that's all there is to it, right?
That's
And,
right.
and this is all malleable, correct? I can change this anytime I want. I've given Lynn building access here. If let's say Lynn is not available to sub anymore this year, I could just unclick that. Is that, and then just update, right, Lynn?
That's right.
So again, that's a powerful checkbox, just so our folks know. That's a really powerful to give people building access. And now if I go up here, you notice that Lynn appears in my drop-down list. He's the 7th sub that I have in my list of folks that are substitutes. Any questions at all, Lynn, on this? It's really pretty straightforward. Again, here's how you can see all your subs. You can edit any of these people you want and update the records. You can go one by one with the arrows if you want. You can add a substitute, you can remove a substitute. Lynn, is there, like you had mentioned before, I would be careful about removing substitutes. If they're going to continue to substitute at some time, you can easily just deactivate them by, well, we're going to talk about it a little bit, by the record add, but also by removing them, then if they ever sub again, you'll have to re-enter them. And so it might be
Right.
best just to leave them dormant, right?
Right. Some schools have retired teachers who are snowbirds, and they might be gone for part of the year. Instead of taking them out and putting them back in, just click that building access box and either give them access or remove the access. And
Perfect.
that keeps them on the list.
Perfect. Oh, that was a new one, I guess I went to. So I go back here to Lynn. And again, this is what he's talking about, just giving access or by one check, and then just hit the update. The key that this one doesn't save on its own, you got to make sure you hit update. But that's the one critical thing that I would tell folks. Other than that, that's about all there is to it. It's pretty darn straightforward. Any questions at all, Lynn, out there? Probably not. It's probably pretty straightforward. Well, let's continue on then.
Hey, hold up. I
Okay.
didn't have, I was muted.
Okay.
We have one question here. Does adding the phone number allow them to get text alerts?
Adding the phone number allow them to get text alerts. I think for that to happen, they have to be, let me think, Lynn, let's think this one. Let me get back to this. That's a great question, by the way.
Not at this time.
I-
You would have to have them entered as an actual staff member, I believe.
Yes, I think you do. You have to have them as a teacher here, and then you'd want them to be an adult, right? As a,
Correct.
yeah, as in the view student data screen, right?
Right.
Yeah, you'd want them to be an adult here, not a grade. You'd want them to be listed as an adult, which would be right here. So any of your people you want to work with Message Center, you need to have entered. Actually, I tell go to the view data screen and set them up as an adult. And then they would be able, and then entering their phone number, then they would be available for the Message Center. I believe that's correct, Lynn. Good question. Any other questions that we have out there? Okay. That was a good one. Scheduling a substitute teacher to take attendance in JMC Teacher. Okay, so now that we've set them up as a sub, now what do we do to actually use that sub and allow them to take attendance in JMC Teacher? Well, assigning a substitute teacher, you have already added to your substitute teachers. Now let's assign them a classroom and give them access to the grade book and or attendance. And again, that's either or. You don't have to give them access to the grade book if you don't want to. After entering in the substitute's information, office users can select which teacher will be subbing for the start and end date and time, and give them gradebook or attendance access. After this, the substitute will be ready to succeed in the classroom. So basically, here's the screen. And what we're going to talk about here is, again, finding up here in the dropdown, selecting the substitute, and you go in the office program under attendance, staff, substitutes. And step one is to click and find our substitute. So we can use the drop down. We can type a few letters of their name and they'll pop up. Find the right teacher. Helpful tip. We can edit a substitute's current access by clicking the edit link, or delete access by clicking the delete link. So right down here, when we have these add records, this is what attaches your substitute now that you've created to classes that they can sub for. Okay, and this allows them, so this bottom schedule line here, when you add records, allows you then to put in teachers and put in a start date and an end date, and even times when they'll be allowed that access. And as you can see in my example here, they're not giving them gradebook access. They're just deciding to give them attendance taking access. But you can do both, or you can do one or the other, whichever you choose. It's, again, up to you, and it's flexibility is up to you as well. You can edit that data or delete that data to start again. This is where you alter that access. Step 3, select the teacher the substitute is teaching for in the teacher dropdown. What's really handy, Lynn, too, is if you add a record, it lets you look through all of your registered teachers to then quickly select them and then go to the other appropriate fields, which is step 4. You enter the start date and time of the substitute schedule in the start date and time fields. And the 5th step is entering the ending date and time of that substitute and when you're going to allow them access to this teacher's class list. Place a check mark in the gradebook access checkbox to give substitutes access to the teacher's gradebook. Most schools do not give gradebook access to the substitute if they will be there for a short period of time. But boy, is this super handy, Lynn, isn't it? When you have a long-term sub and they're going to be here for months, you have somebody out on maternity leave, for instance, you can give them gradebook access and you don't have to recreate the gradebook or any of that kind of thing. Huge time saver.
Yeah, or you don't have to send all that work home for the full-time teacher who is ill or on maternity leave.
Correct. Absolutely. It's good. It's a win-win-win all the way around. Step 7, you can place a check mark in the attendance access checkbox to give the substitute access to report attendance on a teacher's behalf. I had one application I was going to mention here too, Lynn, is sometimes schools hire a teacher to maybe do some grading for a teacher or whatever. You can give them gradebook access without attendance access. So, you know, I think a lot of schools think of this vehicle right here, the gradebook access and attendance access, is just one way. Well, if you give them attendance access, then the choice is whether you give them that gradebook. But sometimes you just want to give them gradebook access and not attendance access. They're not in the classroom for the teacher, but maybe they're a student teacher working with grades or whatever, or getting experience with grades, or there's somebody hired by the district to do grades. They're looking at this gradebook access alone and not allowing just attendance access. So either way it works. It doesn't matter which you choose to do. And of course, all you have to do then is click the save link to store the substitute information, or the cancel link to discard it and start again. Fun fact, a substitute can now log on to JMC Teacher with their given username and password to take attendance for the teacher they are assigned to. Let's take a live look at this. So let's level set, Lynn. Let's go back home. And let's go back into attendance, and let's go to staff, and let's go to substitutes, and let's go to our drop down, and let's find Lynn. And there's Lynn, and let's add a record. And I happen to know that actually I have to go all the way down my list, but I think Mrs. White has some stuff. And notice too, I guess we didn't mention Lynn, but really it defaults to the current date. So let's say, Lynn, we're going to substitute for Mrs. White the 16th, and let's just say it's going to do it through Monday. Not too long of a time. Notice the default is too that these are checked off, both gradebook and attendance access. Again, we decide we're going to do with what usually people do for substitutes and set Mrs. White's class to Lynn here. And Lynn's, again, credentials are L. Evans and Iowa 1 exclamation are his actual credentials to sign on. So now we've set up and we've assigned a class. and a time period. And we got to check here too. We have building access. I'm going to hit update just to make sure we've got building access. Should be all set. If we go here and we go to the teacher program and we go with, and we type in the password. Look at that. How cool is that? Very cool. It shows add and dropped students since our last log on. We could look at that. We can close that. And now we enter attendance. Look at that, Lynn. How about that?
Yep, all ready to take attendance and lunch count for the morning.
You got it. And you got Thursday access. What if we try to get Tuesday access? Let's try a date. Well, let's go forward, not backwards. Let's go to, I think we did Monday. So let's go to Wednesday. Let's go home again. All right, let's close this. I'm just wanting classroom attendance, enter attendance. And if we go to, oh, look at that. I can't do anything. I can't take attendance. I can see them, but I can't do anything with it. Makes sense, right? That's beyond the parameter that I'm allowed to sub. But look at that, Lynn. There it gives me, I can say absent, if I know the reason, sick, right? And I hit attendance is correct.
Yeah, but outside those parameters, you wouldn't be able to manipulate those radio buttons at all.
Absolutely not. If I do that, you see that, Lynn, I'm out. I'm logged on, but I can't do anything to it. So super cool. That's pretty easy. I can do lunch count for Wednesday. Notice it defaults to the day. I can do it Thursday because I've access. I think I set it up through Monday, right? So if I do Tuesday, I bet I can't. I bet when I try to do it, it won't let me. Well, it does. Well, it said it did, but I'm not sure that it did because I'm not sure that I get lunch access. It would probably be tied to the same thing here as well. If I pick another date, again, it shows up, but I'm not able to manipulate it. So there we have it. Questions, Lynn, for this part?
I see none right now.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. That's what we like about JMC, right? It's easy to use.
You know, the date feature.
What was that again, Lynn?
My grandfather clock's going off.
Okay.
The date feature is really cool because if you schedule a teacher out, you can put that date in ahead of time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can do this before time too. That's a great point. That's really handy. And I think too, there's nothing to stop a teacher in the summer from listing all their regular subs and have them all ready to go. So the drop-down menu is accurate with all their substitutes. And the other part of it's pretty easy to set up. And another thing I should show, Lynn, while we're there, let me go back in, is this feature. Like you had mentioned before too, in the office side, we could delete this record, but you see it runs out the 21st. You can leave it too, right? And then you just add another record for another sub time period, correct? I think I can set somebody up in advance, like you had mentioned. If I go the 23rd, let's say they're gonna sub the 23rd through the 25th. I hit save. Notice that it leaves Mrs. White up here on the 16th. Does that hurt anything, Lynn, to leave data in there?
No, and another thing that you can do is if you go over to edit and that teacher has gone longer than you anticipated. So the end date's not the 21st anymore. It's going to be maybe the 24th or the 25th. You can adjust it right there without creating a new record.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm a big fan of leaving this in here and editing. You know, it doesn't hurt anything as long as you've left the parameters where you have them, and the default is 8 in the morning to 4 p.m. I suppose you could cut them off later or start them earlier if you wanted to, but the default is really a day a day's time, which works for most people probably. But again, the application here of just leaving people in here doesn't hurt a thing. If they're going to sub for that, and isn't it true too that, Lynn, a lot of times teachers do sub. If you have retired teachers, they like to sub for their colleagues that they knew really well. So if they sub for if they're going to sub for Mrs. White again, just leave Mrs. White in there. They can edit the dates.
Yeah, no reason you couldn't.
Okay. Any questions we have for this part? All right. Well, that's is easy. It's just very straightforward and very powerful and easy to use. But boy, we need our schools to utilize this. Really saves everybody a lot of time.
Yep, we have one question that just rolled in.
Okay.
Will the substitute profile information roll over to the next school year, or will we need to re-enter their information each school year?
Hey, that's a great question. Wonder if we can check our data on that to see. Okay, so we've got our subs entered. Their question is for next year. Okay, so we can look at next year, can't we?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we could.
And the answer to the question is, well, let's go home first. I'm not sure about this yet. Okay, so now we're in the following year. The one thing I think I'm going to find here is that the information that I've already put in probably isn't going to be there for you, Lynn, because my guess is it's already been moved up to the next year. But what I'm going to say by that is then our answer would still be yes.
When your move up occurs, any subs that you have in at that time should follow.
I don't think you're going to be here. So I want to explain to our audience here, the reason Lynn is not in here, and the answer to the question asked is yes. Your substitutes will roll forward, but here's the problem. Whenever you've moved JMC from this year to the next year, only the data that you moved up would follow. So I'd have to re-enter Lynn because I just entered him today and I already have moved up my data for the following year. I hope that's not a confusing answer. Lynn, can you say that better than I am, or how do you explain why that's not, showing up?
Yeah, when you roll your data up for the next school year, anything you enter after that, you would have to re-enter.
Right. But if you do have your substitute,
that should move.
So I guess the answer to the question in real, the correct answer would be all of the data that you have entered in this year up to the point that you've told JMC to roll you forward to next year would transfer. Is that right? I think that's
the way I understand it.
That's the best way to answer that question, Lynn. So in answer to that question, basically, yes, anything you've entered this year should roll over into next year and would allow you to edit those substitutes from that screen, add new dates, add new times, and have them still substitute in your system. Very much like the teacher feature, right, Lynn? I mean, once you enter your staff, you don't have to re-enter them year after year.
Correct.
Okay. Well, if there are no, I'm going to back up. If there are no more questions, Lynn, then that's as simple as it can be. And again, very JMC-like, right? It's entering substitutes. It's then editing substitutes to sub for different teachers in your building and updating that, and then allowing them either gradebook or attendance access or both. And that is a super big savings of time for your building's offices. And they really appreciate if this tool is utilized in the software, it saves a lot of people a lot of time.
I know from experience as a substitute, checking into the office for me goes a lot quicker, and it goes a lot quicker for the office staff. A lot of times they already have it entered before I walk in the door.
Perfect.
And really works slick.
Great.
If you're not using the feature now, I would encourage you to at least play around with it.
Absolutely. And anything you put in this year will carry to next year if you haven't if you haven't rolled up. And if you have rolled up, you can put the data in next year, right, Lynn? Then it would be there for next year.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that's what I would suggest. If you've already rolled your data with JMC to next year and you're already seeing next year in your database, then for sure, if you're going to mess with substitutes and put them in, do them in next year so that that data will be there in the fall when you're going to utilize it. All right, upcoming events with JMC. Well, here's the upcoming webinar schedule. So in February, the 23rd, it's planning for standards-based grading 22-23. And then in March, do you want to play in the sandbox? Utilize a JMC demo site. That's where I'm up for that one too, Lynn. And that one I'm going to show the sandbox, which some of our clients don't know about. And it's an addition that you can actually get, you can actually ask JMC to create a sandbox for your district, and that way you can utilize that sandbox without without contaminating any of the real data of your building, and try new schedules. Let's say you're looking in a year to go to a block schedule or a modified block schedule. You can play with it in the sandbox and not wreck your data that you're using in real time. So this is a feature that allows you to have a demo site for your district and play with things in that demo that won't wreck your day-to-day data. So a lot of our districts are signing up for a sandbox so that they can play with some new scheduling ideas. It's a really, really cool feature that JMC allows. So that's coming in March on the 2nd, and then March the 9th, we have Getting Ready for GATE, which is general admission. Let's see.
Two events.
2 events. Yeah. And that is a really slick.
Really cool.
Yeah. What is that
it's
about,
really,
Lynn?
you can go in your system and you can put in if kids are allowed to go as a spectator. Maybe they're restricted because of behavior or because of attendance that they can't go to after school events, and it shows up right there on the screen. And you can set it up so you can do a moneyless form of payment to pay your ticket to get in for students. And yeah, really a slick feature. We have
Cool.
one school using it right now full blown, and they love it.
Awesome. Be great to share that new feature in March on the 9th. So sign up for that on the JMC homepage. And the 16th, we have the JMC Family Intro. All really good webinars. Again, to sign up, you just go to that opening screen that pops up when you launch JMC Office and sign up right from that home screen. Refer a friend, it's back, and now through July 2022, that should say, not 21, we're offering schools that refer their friends or their schools next door. If they sign on with JMC, they get a $500 scholarship for their school district. And we are still hiring client service specialists. We're hiring 6 passionate part-time client service specialists in Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin as client service specialists. You develop meaningful relationships with our users and communication, training, and support. And in return, we offer competitive salary and opportunity to work remotely. If you want to read the full job posting, it's here in the link. Also, if you're interested in applying or if you want to refer somebody to apply, they just have to email hr@jmcinc.com. Again, hr@jmcinc.com. Be social with us. We always appreciate you following our feeds on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, or our blog at jmcinc.com/news. I thank you for your attendance today in today's webinar on putting in substitute teachers to help make your office staff more efficient and your building run more smoothly. I want to thank Lynn Evans for his commentary today too on today's webinar rather, and appreciate all of you taking the time out of your busy day to join us. And thank you for using JMC.